Hey guys, this is Avilo bringing you another metagame update here. I believe this is metagame update number 7 or so. And what this one is about is the patch. I just actually woke up. I slept from must have been 5:30 p.m. yesterday till about 6:30 or so a.m. today. So I don't know if that's a coincidence or if I was just if my body was just preparing itself for this patch that was being released, is what I think happened. And so they released the Heart of the Swarm Balance Update number 8 here, which I have on my screen, which may be blurry depending on how good my resolution is and whatnot. But anyways, if you just go on Team Liquid and look at the community news and go to Heart of the Swarm Balance Update number 8, you can read this along with me while you listen to me speak here. But I'm gonna go through everything that they changed and analyze it. This is gonna be a first impression video, and then I'll release another one after I've played at least 100 games or so with Terran. But yeah, it looks like this patch. If I could make a notepad document really quickly here to describe what this patch actually does for Terran players really quickly, let me just write you a too long didn't read patch notes. Let's say you're about to go on an airplane or something and you're like, Avilo, tell me what the patch does for Terran. Well, patch notes, Heart of the Swarm, balance patch 8. What does it do for Terran? Terran has been added back into the game. Yes, they've actually added Terran back into the game. It's no longer just Zerg and Protoss craft. It seems like they've decided they do love 3 races being in the game, and they did. They put Terran back in. So that's the too long didn't read patch notes for this patch. But let's actually get a little serious here and analyze the changes, because there's quite a few of them. So Terran, first change, and this is one they said, I believe David Kim had posted a bunch of stuff that they were going to do. So here's what it is. New ability, emergency thrusters. Speed boost increases the movement speed and acceleration to 4.25 for 8 seconds on a 20-second cooldown. So if I'm reading this right, and I don't remember the base Medivac speed, I think it's 2.25 or something like that. But let's check what the muta speed is, so we can do a little comparison here. So the speed of mutas is 3.75. That's the mutalisk speed, and the speed booster is going to increase Medivac speed to 4.25 for 8 seconds. So yeah, that's pretty fast. You could run away from a mutalisk. You could run away from a muta. So what does this do? What implications does this have on the game? And it doesn't say that this is an upgrade here, which I find strange because that sounds pretty damn overpowered. From an objective point of view, Medivacs that can speed boost faster than muta for 8 seconds. Sounds pretty OP. I would think that there's an upgrade. They would make an upgrade for that. But this is, I'm assuming they just put it in as an initial thing, shock factor to test it out. So yeah, you're going to be able to run away from mutalisks. You're going to be able to run away from phoenixes, I think. Basically, it's going to be, let's say that you're going to drop into a base, and it's, oh shit, they have blink stalkers. Oh my god, they have something there. You could speed boost your way out of there, and yeah, so I think this is actually, besides offensive capability, speed boosting into a base, past a cannon, past a missile turret or whatever, I think that the name is appropriate, emergency thrusters. This will make it so you can actually keep your Medivacs alive and not drop when you don't want to drop. So you can actually escape a little bit easier. I don't know how I like this, because even though it's good for TVZ and TVP, what I would say here is they need to have a drawback to this. There has to be a little slight drawback, right? How about emergency thrusters takes up some of the Medivac's energy? And the reason I'm saying that is because that's twofold. Let's say that you use the emergency thrusters and you're draining your medevac energy while doing that. It's twofold. A, it's a drawback, so it's not overpowered. And B, in Terran versus Protoss, you actually don't want your medevacs to have energy in the late game when you're doing drops because of cannon plus Templar defense. You can get feedbacks really easily. So what I would say is they should have it drain the medevac energy while you're doing that, so late game TVP drops are more viable, so you don't actually have to EMP your own medevac dropship. So that's, that could be an improvement upon that. That would actually be a drawback plus a boon to Terran versus Protoss. So I think that would be an that would be an all-around change for every matchup. I don't like it mech. I don't like it for TVT because it makes medevacs better against mech. I can imagine Terran players going by flying medevacs into turret rings now. So I think what they'll do is they'll probably decrease this speed. They'll probably tone it down after people start using it a lot, I believe. But overall this is good because it makes bio better. Now, Medivac Caduceus reactor upgrade at the starport. Health restored per second is up from 9 to 15. The energy cost reduced from 3 health per 1 energy to 5 health per 1 energy. And the cost of the upgrade is increased along with that. And it takes longer to upgrade. So, just to feed my ego a little bit, I want to show you guys what I wrote in another thread here when I was commenting on the Medivac, on what they were doing with the Medivac. I said, yeah, with all the stuff from the other two races, bio would be left behind. How about a Medivac healing rate upgrade? Increases the healing rate of Medivacs but uses Medivac energy twice as fast? Like Stim for Medivacs? Maybe Medivac can heal 2 units at once? One can imagine. So it looks like they did actually add something in the game that increases the Medivac healing rate, because now it heals 15 health per second with that Caduceus reactor upgrade instead of only 9. So yeah, I'm pretty damn good, okay? I know my shit. The thing I would say here is it's a double buff, which I don't know, that might be too much. Might be good, might be bad, but the energy cost is reduced from 3 health per 1 second to 5 health per 1 second, so you're healing 5 health per 1 energy. Now, what I had wrote, when I said maybe a Medivac healing upgrade increases the healing rate of Medivacs, but uses Medivac energy twice as fast, I actually had it, when I wrote that ability, I actually had a drawback built into the ability, because, it's very tricky when you're doing RTS design or whatever, or when you're adding things into a game. You don't want to double buff things because it could end up being overpowered quite easily. So usually you want a drawback that's not too bad built into the ability. So this is actually a double buff for the Medivac. There's not a drawback for having the Caduceus reactor. It just makes it completely better, which it may turn out. That might be good for bio. We don't know. All right, now the Reaper. The base speed is increased from 2.95 to 3.375, and the upgraded speed is also increased from 3.84 to 4.25. So the upgraded speed, a Reaper will move as fast as a speed boosted Medivac. Wrap your head around that. Wrap your head. Now that is a holy shit moment right there when you read that. Yeah. So a Reaper will move faster than a speed upgraded mutalisk, which is pretty interesting. But keep in mind they remove the building attack upgrade, so you can't kill buildings mega fast. The only thing you can kill fast are light units. But now, so what they've done here is they've made a buff that buffs the unit's utility indirectly. They didn't buff its statistics any. They didn't change the damage it does. They didn't make it stronger in terms of its any variable statistics or stats that the unit has. They just made the only stat they made better was the speed. So now it's sort of like an attention thing. Can you pay attention to your Reapers to run them away? Which I think I don't know. I don't like it because Terran versus Terran, I think, is going to become Reaper. It's even going to be more Reaper oriented, which I think is incredibly bad. So what I would say here is the upgraded speed, I think that's fine. The base speed, I think that's going to make it too strong in a mirror matchup, Terran versus Terran. And when you have something that pulls a mirror matchup, so it makes it more chaotic and less, you know, it's the players, it's more luck oriented. I think that's bad. So I don't like that the base speed was increased. The upgraded speed gives it better utility later on in the game, perhaps. So maybe that's okay. Now the Widow Mine no longer hits cloaked units. I don't know how I like that, because now the two main things this does are Cloaked Banshees and Dark Templar. You can now open those against a Terran that is opening mech, quote unquote, and you'll have a really good time against them. The reason I don't like this is because let's say that you open Dark Templar against a Terran player opening mech. Now the player that opens DT, they'll have really easy access to Archons as well, and Archons are really good against mech with Immortals and Charged Zealots. Immortal Archon Charged Zealot is the standard versus mech Protoss ground army, and so it makes, and if you'll notice here, Dark Shrine is now cost reduced. Those two things in combination means that it's sort of like an indirect buff to mech play, Terran versus Protoss. But we'll get to that later. The new upgrade, Drilling Claws, decreases the burrow time from 3 seconds to 1 second. Requires a Tech Lab and an Armory. So what I'm going to say here about this change is, this is a change that initially right now people are going to say it doesn't matter. No one will ever research that upgrade. But what I think will happen is later on, as people figure the game out more, this will probably become something you get in mid-game that makes your mines a hell of a lot better, although they still suck past the mid-game. So, I mean, mines are still in a weird place, in my opinion, because they're good, they're really strong early game, and, you know, when you're entering mid-game, they're very strong, but once you get to late game, you don't want any mines. You want to get rid of all of the mines you have, because that's too supply into a unit that has no guarantee to pay off if the opponent is of a high skill caliber. So, I guess they're testing that out. I don't know. I know a lot of people complained that they think the Widow Mine made Dark Templars not as good, or made Cloak Banshees not as good, so that's probably why they did that. They listened to the casual players on this change, which is something I don't think is good. Now the Thor. 250mm strike cannons have been removed. Hallelujah, bitches. This is... Now, I haven't... my game, if you can see here, I'm actually downloading the patch right now. So I haven't played it or tested the units yet, which is why this is just a first impressions thing. But I'm assuming, or I'm thinking, that the energy is removed with this also. That they've removed the energy from Thor, the energy bar. And if that's true, this is a game changer. This alone, what this change does, this Thor change alone, it takes mech in terms of patches all the way back to the patch where everybody will probably remember that series Thorzane versus MC on that like Crossfire map in TSL I think 3, where Thorzane was using Thor builds with strike cannons and whatnot, and the Thors didn't have energy bars back then, and like a week or less than a week or something, or 2 weeks after that series, Blizzard had nerfed the Thor. They added the energy bar back. They just made the Thor suck in Terran vs. Protoss. And so now what they've finally done is they've removed it again. This should have been done ages ago to help mech versus Protoss. I honestly think they didn't have the balls to do this in Wings of Liberty. So now that it's all safe in Heart of the Swarm, they're doing this. So they're with everything else in the game interacting with each other, they've decided, okay, we'll try this. Let's see what happens. So now we're back to that. In terms of balance, we're thrown back to that place where the Thor was actually good against Protoss because it didn't have the energy bar. the energy bar made it so a Thor could essentially lose 200 HP from a feedback from a Templar, and then the Templar morphs into an Archon. So Thors were quite bad against Protoss in general because of that change alone. So now, you know, that's a game changer. You can make Thors again, and they'll be pretty good against most things. What this means is they don't have to nerf the Immortal, because the Immortal is going to be key in fighting against Thors and things. So now here's the next thing, and this is something I had actually on the pro forums, me and a bunch of other people I think had, I mean everybody in general was saying do something with the Thor, and I think once again, me specifically, I remember suggesting that maybe give it like 2 modes, make it make it like all the other mech units where they have to switch modes, and this is what they've done. The Thor can now switch between 2 modes, high impact payload and explosive payload. The mode shift takes 4 seconds, so I think this is exactly something that I had suggested, man. I know my shit, okay? They made it so it's something you have to think about as a Terran player. It's something you can't just instantly switch modes. You have to do it in advance. So this is something that makes it, you have to be knowledgeable about when to have your Thor in each mode and how many Thors to switch into that mode, along with how many siege tanks to have in siege mode, along with how many battle hellions to have in battle hellion mode, along with your Widow Mines, when you want your Widow Mines to be on auto attack or to manually control them. So this is making mech harder to play. This is a change that makes mech more difficult for the Terran to play, not just 1A. So this is something that everybody was complaining about the Warhound, that the Warhound was very 1A unit. This makes it so you actually, you have to know, do you want it in this mode or not? It's going to take 4 seconds to change it. So that makes mech more difficult to play. It increases the skill cap. So that alone, the mode shift, or having something like that, is good. Now let's see what it does. When in high impact mode, the Thor switches to a different anti-air gun called the 250mm Punisher cannons. That has 10 range and deals a flat 24 damage. So that's 24 damage to light, medium, heavy, whatever the hell the armor types are. Any unit, it'll do 24 flat damage to. So what this means is they're making it so you have something to fight against massive air units. They're making it so you have. What they're doing, all those threads I made about like Tempest, like Terran mech having no answer to Tempest from the ground. This is what they're doing. They're giving the Thor something that can potentially, they can always, work on this, make it stronger. Which 24 doesn't. I don't know if that's enough to matter, but it's better than nothing. So now when you go mech, you now have this ground unit. The Thor, since the Thor will be better overall, you'll be building more of them. And since you'll be building more of them, what this means is you'll have something that can help fight against carriers, Tempests, Broodlords. That's the other thing. This does a 24 flat to Broodlords at 10 range. It's not as long range as the Thor's normal anti-air attack. Although that's the thing, I don't know if they have. I'm not sure. If they remove the Thor's anti-air splash damage gun? That's what I'm not sure. Do they still have the light anti-air splash damage gun? Because if they just replaced it with this, I don't think that's good. But if they gave it 2 different modes of anti-air, that's good. So what I'm hoping once my game finishes loading here is I can check this out and see, like, oh, they gave it a secondary anti-air gun that switches to this single target 24 damage mode that you can use specifically against higher priority targets like Broodlords, Tempest carriers, and even battlecruisers and TBT. And what this does by making the Thor more of a viable anti-air unit, assuming that it has both anti-air types of guns, the light splash damage one for mutas, and this single target higher damage one, is it reduces the emphasis on Vikings a little bit. now you won't have to necessarily have Vikings to counter air units like anything. So you know, this is a huge change for mech overall. A lot of the changes that you have to think that a lot of the impacts it has on the game aren't necessarily clear when you read the change, but it has a lot of underlying things that are going on there, like, you know, maybe you don't need as many Vikings now, and since Vikings are basically bad against everything on the ground, this could be good. So I think overall those changes have potential. I don't think this will be the initial. I don't think this will be the end change. I think this value will probably be up. That's just the feeling I get on it, because I don't know how well it'll do against Tempests and carriers and whatnot, and battle cruisers, but we'll see. You never know. So Raven, Secret Missile has been this is the change I already read. I don't like it. Can now fire from range 10. The missile comes out, stays immobile in front of the Raven for 3 seconds while charging up, then rapidly moves. It's not dodgeable at this point, and explodes at the target for 300 single target damage. The targeted unit lights up red, and if the unit moves 13 range out of the way, then the missile fizzles away. Now let me explain. You guys, if you've seen my last video, you know that the problem with the Raven is not. It doesn't have anything to do with the secret missile damage. The range, that's arguable whether it could have longer range, but the main thing with the Raven is the accessibility of the secret missile. It's not how much damage it's doing. It already does 125 damage, which is quite a bit. And you'll note that this is single target damage. This is bad. They're making it so they basically, what they've done is, it seems like a buff, but this is actually a nerf to the Raven, because it's not accessible. You have to wait for the 125 energy. They didn't change anything with that, and they made it single target damage. There's no splash damage in there, unless there is splash damage. You know, this is something they'll have to figure out. But what they've tried to do is they've tried to make it overpowered, but they didn't change anything with the accessibility of the spell. So you'll still have to wait from 75 energy to 125 energy, which is bad. Very, very bad. You're going to have too many situations still where the Raven, you make a bunch of Ravens and they're just sitting there, and you're just like, okay, well now what? Now I die. Or, you know, now the opponent can attack me and the Raven doesn't do anything. So, I think Blizzard is they just don't listen on the Raven, on why the Raven needs redesign, because this, I know people are going to look at this change and say, wow, the Raven is so amazing and strong, but that's not what makes the Raven, that's not how the Raven should be strong and how it should be buffed. It needs to be buffed in terms of accessibility, like being able to make a Raven and it does something, like that you can use it. Because nothing changes. You still have to wait like a minute, 2 minutes, you know, sometimes even 3 if you don't have the starports up, to make a Raven do anything. And so this change does nothing with that. You know, the change that I keep like spouting on about, like make the Corvid reactor increase the starting energy to 100, is a change that increases the accessibility. This really doesn't do anything to the Raven in terms of accessibility. I think they'll revert this change once they see that nothing in terms of building Ravens and using them has changed. Like, yeah, you got a really shiny and strong damage secret missile now, but that'll wear off. It'll wear off. People will be eventually, after a couple weeks, or even sooner than that, people will realize, man, it's still so hard to get this secret missile. Like, it's almost pointless. Like, yeah, if you can turtle for an hour, then it might be okay. But I think all these changes to the Raven seem like they don't know what they're doing, or they don't understand the underlying design problem that the Raven has to be more accessible. They just made it flat out. They made the Seeker flat out stronger, which, you know, doesn't make any sense. And also, it doesn't help against Broodlord Corruptor, because single target damage is not splash damage. So I don't think this change is good, regardless of how good it looks on paper. I think everyone will realize it's not such a good change for the game, and that the Raven should be more accessible, not like have like an over. It shouldn't have some mega overpowered spell when you finally do get the energy for it. It should just be made more accessible, and you have a weaker spell when you do get the energy. But the energy should be easier to get to, is what I'm saying. Hellbat splash damage radius increased 90 to 110, so it'll do more splash against charge lots, Zerglings. If it gets up close to things, it'll do more splash to workers and whatnot. Obviously, it helps mech TVP, so that's fine. Armory now only has one weapon and armor upgrade for both air and ground. So what this means, this change is targeted at mech, at reducing. It's targeted at two things specifically. A, at reducing costs, Vespian gas cost on mech players, because when you go mech, once it gets to a certain stage in the game, you eventually need Vikings, and that's the second thing it's targeted at. It's targeted at the resource costs involved with going mech, and it's targeted at building Vikings when you're going mech. Oftentimes, the opponent can switch into, if it's TVT, they can go battle cruisers, Protoss can go carriers and Tempest, and Zerg can go Broodlord, Corruptor, and Fester. And so what this change, the Armory change is targeted at, is making it so you don't, once you have 3-3 mech upgrades, you also have 3-3 air upgrades. You don't have to wait another 5, 7, 10 minutes to finish the air upgrades. Normally what you would have to do is you would finish 3-3 mech, and then you go into 3-3 air, and it would take forever. So now you will have the 3-3 air, so that means Vikings will be stronger. You'll have 3-3 Vikings when you have 3-3 mech, which means Vikings still suck, but they don't suck as badly. is what I'll say there. So now Vikings don't. Before they sucked balls, now they sucked less balls. Now they're just sucking on one of the balls instead of both of the balls. So yeah, that's a good change. The mothership. Now recall works like the mothership core does, so you have the mothership with your army and you recall back to your nexus. So it's not an offensive spell, it's more of a defensive one. Vortex kills a single target, does not affect massive units, so they just completely nerfed it so that it's not as good. It's not a game changer anymore, it just kills one thing. And mothership core is no longer massive, so it doesn't take damage from massive. Pulsar beam. Now it's called Activate Pulsar Beam and Deactivate Pulsar Beam. They did a little name change there. When it's activated, it's enabled. Well, that's pretty straightforward. Weapon deals 15 plus 10 versus light. It's changed. Weapon period changed to 0.86 down from 1, so I guess it lasts or something. And the range is reduced to 4. Build time of the unit is increased 50 up from 35. Energy now drains 4 per second, which I think is more. I think it was 2 per second before, right? So what do these changes do for the Oracle? It makes it a unit that doesn't kill everything in terms of buildings. It's more of a worker harassment now. I don't know. It does more damage to light, so obviously against workers it'll do damage pretty quickly, but it takes longer to build them. So it's more, they finally have made it more of a worker killing unit. Now the Phoenix, the range is increased by 1, and the upgrade still grants +2 range. So this change, the reason they increased the range by 1, you may be thinking like, holy crap, they made the range, they made it that much more range. Now here's the thing. In RTS games, when range is increased on units that are used often, it can flip the balance of a unit interaction on its head. I played Command & Conquer while I was waiting for StarCraft 2 to come out for like 2 or 3 years. And the developers of Command & Conquer, there was a point in time where tanks versus missilemen, the tanks would always like steamroll the missile infantry. And so what the developers did was they increased the range of missile infantry by 2. And you may be thinking, wow, that sounds familiar. It sounds like the Queen range upgrade or this Phoenix range upgrade. And what happened the next patch the patch after they increased missile range, the infantry missile range, by 2, the exact opposite balance scenario happened. Instead of tanks absolutely obliterating the missile infantry, you could spam tanks and roll them over. Now missile infantry were being spammed, and the tanks they would not even get close before the missile infantry were able to kill the tanks. And so the game went from being spamming tanks to spamming missile infantrymen. So this is something that, like, when they reduce the range of fungal, that is a huge nerf. When they increase the range of Phoenix by 1, it's a huge nerf. This is something that, you know, it's a huge nerf. Increasing the range of units in an RTS game is very dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. I hope that they really plan this out, or that, you know, I hope that they're aware of you know, when they mess with the unit's range, you know, just like the Queen range increase, it flipped early game on its head. It made Zerg early game so much more safe, because Queens can hold off things that they normally wouldn't be able to hold off. So this is really a dangerous change, increasing the unit's range by 1. This is the most dangerous change for balance in this entire patch, is this Phoenix range upgrade. Range is always, in terms of changes, it's always the most dangerous, because a unit can quickly go from being underpowered or from being borderline useful to being completely and utterly overpowered, and changing the interaction of a unit with another unit. And so what is their reasoning for this? Increasing the range of the Phoenix by 1 obviously makes it stronger by a lot, but this goes along with the mutalisk change down here. They're increasing the mutalisk speed by 0.25. The acceleration is the same. So what they're doing is they're preemptively buffing the Phoenix, because they're buffing the mutalisk, which is good. They realize that there may be a problem here. But the thing is, what their line of thought was, Blizzard's line of thought, they thought of the mutalisk change first. They wanted mutalisks to be more useful as a unit, so they wanted to increase the speed of the muta. So what they've done here is they looked at the counters to the muta. Now, what would happen if they increased the mutalisk speed in terms of counters from Protoss? They need to make sure that Protoss still has a counter to the mutalisk, but they don't want to change anything else that'll affect the game. And so what they did was they looked at the Phoenix, which is a hard counter to the mutalisk, and they increased the range. And they're gonna this is gonna be a huge test in the beta to see how this range increase interacts with the mutalisk speed increase, because there's a danger here that mutalisks could become an easily massable unit with this 0.25 speed increase alone. It could go from being, you know, the muta how it is now, to being every game mass mutalisk, which is like it was in vanilla StarCraft, where the muta was dominant. And so these changes go together. The mutalisk change is the initial one that they were brainstorming, because they all of the counters to the muta, there's a lot more counters like the Widow Mine and things like that to the mutalisk in Heart of the Swarm. So they wanted to make the muta better, but they, you know, this is the thing that they gave to Protoss to have a counter. If this becomes a problem, mass muta, then the Phoenix will be there, and it'll be a little bit better to help counter that. So that's what those changes do together. The Dark Shrine cost is now 100, down from 100 to 250. This is craziness right here. I think this is a little bit over. You know, it's borderline too much. They took it down from 250 to 100 gas. The mineral cost is not the thing that matters here. It's the Vespian gas cost. And what they've done is reduced it by 150. This is really worrying, because now a lot of things like Dark Templar plus Warp Prism drop comes a lot earlier in the game. Dark Templars in general are just globally buffed because of this is the thing, they're more accessible. Just like I was talking about making the Raven a more accessible unit, not a stronger unit in any way, You know, don't make the secret missile stronger. And I hope that Blizzard would listen to this, and that other people would understand this. You don't want to make the Raven stronger. That's not what you want to do to make the unit better, to make the unit stronger overall. You want to make it more accessible as a unit. And the Corvid reactor increasing the Raven energy to 100 makes it more accessible. Flat out making the unit be mega strong in terms of damage does not make the unit stronger. It's still not as accessible. Now, look at the Dark Templar change they did for Protoss. They reduced the cost of 100, so that means the prerequisite to unlock Dark Templars, you can now build the shrine much earlier on in the game, so you have access to the Dark Templar earlier in the game and in different places in the game. It makes the unit more accessible. They didn't actually change the stats on the Dark Templar. The Dark Templar still does the same damage, still is cloaked, it still costs the same amount of resources. It's just more accessible as a unit now because of this change. Just like with the Raven, they should do the same thing. Make the Corvid reactor essentially like the Dark Shrine. Make it the limiting factor. The Corvid reactor should limit the Raven's accessibility, just like the Dark Shrine limits the Dark Templar's accessibility in the game. So that's something to take here. Is this is bad? Just flat out increasing damage and making it like some like super weapon where it's not as accessible. You still have to wait for 125 energy. Whereas this makes a unit more accessible because the prerequisite for the unit in terms of Vespian gas cost is globally reduced, which means, you know, you can get Dark Templars earlier in the game, just like you should be able to get the Seeker Missile a little bit earlier in the game. Instead of having to wait 50 energy, just wait 25 energy. So I find those changes interesting, that the Dark Templar, they sort of went with making it more accessible, and the Raven still not as accessible, so still, you know, still has the same problem. Tempest now requires Fleet Beacon, attacks with 2 weapons. Primary weapon, Kinetic Overlord, hits air units and remains unchanged. Secondary weapon, hits ground units and does not deal bonus damage to massive. Now, does this mean that it switches modes, that you have to switch modes? Because I'm not reading anything here about switching modes. So now it just has 2 weapons, apparently. So what I think they did here, you know, on the pro forums and on Team Liquid, I've been posting replays and trying to give my feedback on the Tempest, on how it's probably too powerful right now. Tempest plus Templar sort of counters everything from all 3 races once you get to it. And, you know, once players learn to get to it, as we've all seen with Infestor Broodlord, once you learn to get there, you have an overpowered unit composition that counters everything in the game. That's what Tempest plus Templar is right now. And so what does this do? They've split the weapons in half in terms of damage. I don't know if it fires both weapons at the same time. You know, I have to wait till my patch downloads or whatever. But so what it does is, now it doesn't do massive damage to ground. That's the key thing here. So it does massive damage to massive air units. So battle cruisers, carriers, broodlords take a lot of damage from the Tempest. But ultralisks, Thors, and Archons and Colossus do not take massive damage from the Tempest. So what this means is now Tempests don't counter everything, because before they were countering literally everything, like everything, and Templar would cover anything that they didn't counter. So now in PvP, theoretically, late game, you can now build Colossus and they won't be insta-gibbed by Tempest. You can build Archons. It's not going to be such a rout when the game's... basically, you can't just mass Tempest now against ground units. The Tempest now is more specifically to deal with Broodlord, Battlecruiser, and carriers from all 3 races. So now it's more of an anti-air massive unit rather than an anti-everything. Now I don't know if that is enough. It still may be enough. It still may be really good against ground units. It still does a lot of damage. So, but yeah, that's a step in the right direction. So now Tempest do not counter everything. Prismatic beam no longer charges up. Weapon period decreased. No longer does passive. It doesn't do damage versus massive. New ability increases the damage to armored units by 6 for 20 seconds with a 1-minute cooldown. Does not scale with upgrades. So, what is the difference here? It doesn't charge up. So now it just does as much damage as it did charged up before. That seems pretty overpowered. I'm guessing. That, holy shit. That's, hello Void Ray all in. 3-gate Void Ray all in with Mothership Core. I don't know how I like that. I'm not sure. It obviously makes the unit stronger if it doesn't need to charge up. This, I don't know how I like, because I think Tempests are going to be the unit to go to for fighting against massive units. They don't really need this thing in the game. It's just sort of like an extra thing that they added because, well, the Void Ray is now like the ugly stepchild of the Oracle. So Hydralisks, speed upgrade requires lair tech. This is something people were talking about on the pro forums, and that everybody on every forum, everybody in the community was saying, man, Hydras are pretty bad. Why don't you test the upgrade at lair tech? And so that's what they've done here. And they probably thought that was a good idea in the first place, I would think, because yeah, at hive tech, the speed upgrade is overshadowed by everything else. So mutalisk, speed increased. I sort of went through this already, but it makes it a lot stronger. You can now make mutas and they'll get away better. It's gonna be, you know, it's dangerous because the muta is good against technically everything. So you may have, it makes mutas better, but you may have this situation where you can go mass muta against everything. So they have to be really careful. Now, they considered what would happen against Protoss, and they added the Phoenix range. They increased it by 1 as a preemptive counter to the muta, speed being increased. Now, what did they give Terran? They gave the Widowmine to Terran, and so that was a complaint or an argument from a lot of people that the Widowmine made mutalisks less useful, and so they didn't add anything else to Terran because they figure the Widowmine is the addition that already would be able to deal with the speed increase to the muta. So it looks like they have that covered in terms of counters. Swarm host health increased. I don't think that's good. It's already a powerful unit that requires little to 0 micro. You just burrow it, and then it's a click and forget unit. You just burrow it, rally it to the opponent's base, and then you just forget about it. You can stutter step the locust, but really, it's already a strong unit. It's just now it'll take like an extra siege shot or an extra Colossus beam, I guess. So I don't know about that. That was unnecessary. It was already really powerful. They want to see it being used more, is what I'm guessing. Fungal growth. Also, this makes 2-base Zerg, Infestor, Corruptor, Swarm host plus Proxy, Spore Crawler, Creep Tumor, Queens. Might make that too strong against Protoss. I don't know how it'll work against Terran because siege tanks are a little bit more accessible than Colossus are a little bit earlier on. Now the Infestor. Fungal growth is now a projectile. Speed of the projectile is 10. Range is decreased down to 8 from 9. Infested Terran Egg is 70. So same thing as the changes they did to Wings of Liberty. Now here's the changes they added. The projectile change. Thank God. That's how it should be in Wings of Liberty, to be honest. So what they're doing here is they're adding this into a live game, which is Heart of the Swarm beta, to test it out, and then possibly if it works out, they'll add it in to Wings of Liberty, is what I would hope. And hopefully with this change too, this would be the next logical step. Infested Terrans don't gain weapon and armor upgrades, just like the auto turret, because when you have a unit that's essentially free resource-wise, only costs energy, the longer the game goes, the more overpowered these things become. That's why it's not a good idea to give auto turrets upgrades, because they're free units. The longer, in the later stages of the game, if you maintain those mass infestors, or even with Terran, if you have that huge flock of ravens in the late game, you don't want free units having access to upgrades, because it just makes them too powerful in the later stages when minerals and investment gas are off the map. So it's good that they remove this. That'll help with the infestor being good against everything. Ultralisk burrow charge is gone. Damage increased to 35 against everything. So now it's just not. It doesn't just counter armored. It literally counters everything on the ground. So it can kill a marine in 2 shots now, or a marauder in about the same. The Viper health increased from 120 to 150. I don't know about that. The Viper is already showing to be really good. How it was. Yeah, they just made it stronger sort of arbitrarily there. That's what I don't like when arbitrary changes are made. This one seems like, we're gonna increase the range of the queen by 2, and we're gonna increase overlord speed. Like, this is sort of arbitrary. The swarm host health and the Viper health is sort of like, we're just gonna buff Zerg just for the hell of it. You notice most of these other changes they're changes that add a dynamic to the game in terms of speed, or like the healing rate, or this ability, Muta speed, Dark Shrine, Tempest. They all are changes that are directed at addressing an issue in the game while still adding depth to the game, much like Brood War, StarCraft 1 to Brood War. The developers added things that added depth, like Disruption Web, Dark Archon Maelstrom, things like that. This change, if you look at all the changes in this patch, and you can single out these 2 changes, the Viper health and the Swarm Host health, and they're sort of arbitrary changes. They don't actually address any issue specifically with anything else in the game. They just simply make these units stronger, which is, in my opinion, not good, because they were already made a little bit stronger before. What they should have done was they should have waited, and they should have waited and seen oh, Vipers are being used, they're pretty good, or they're dying too quickly, we need to increase the health. And I don't think that was the case previously. So these are just sort of changes that just flat out buff those units without really a specific reason. So those are the changes, guys. Those are my first impressions and analysis of all of the changes and the impacts that they have on the game. Overall, I think that they're pretty bold changes. I think the most impactful change is the Mutalisk speed and the Phoenix range. Those are pretty huge changes. The range, like I said, it's the most dangerous change you can make in a game. When you increase the range of a unit or decrease the range of a unit, that it has implications everywhere. The worst change, I would say, is the Raven change. This does not make it's not a buff. Doesn't make the unit more accessible. Yeah, you'll have mega strong secret missile, but it doesn't address the core issue with the Raven, which is accessibility. Now the best change, that's the worst change. The best change, this one is hard. There's so many good changes here. The best change, I would say it's going to be a Terran one, because Terran hasn't had changes in a long time. It's going to be the Armory. This is the best change, I would say, because if I could say 2, it would be the Armory and the Thor, because of the implications for mech play in Terran versus Protoss. But I would say the armory change is the biggest change and the best change in the patch, because this is a change directed at Vikings being not as sucky, and at making mech a little less resource intensive in terms of upgrades, since you're going to eventually have to have Vikings anyways. Now you don't need to buy the upgrades, you don't need 2 more armories, so that's a lot of Vespian gas. That's over 1,000 Vespian gas total from the level 1, 2, 3 air upgrades, the double armories. That's, you know, easily over 1,000 Vespian gas. That is and over 10 minutes worth of, or like 7 to 10 minutes worth of upgrade time that's now gone from mech plus Vikings, where, because, you know, mech needs those Vikings as anti-air, so that 10 minutes of Vikings being gone is it's gone. So thank you guys for listening, and I will definitely post another video after I have played through the changes and analyzed them more in terms of actually playing.